The Valorian Empire had conquered 47 star systems, subjugated 12 sentient species, and maintained galactic dominance for 3,000 years. Yet somehow, filling out Form 7734B for Xenobiological Research Personnel Protection Detail Assignment still required 17 signatures, 3 blood samples, and 1 offering to the god of unnecessary paperwork. Imperial Administrator Feng sat in his crystalline office aboard the Throne World's orbital station, contemplating whether throwing himself out the airlock would be less painful than this meeting. Before him stood a human, and humans were the Empire's latest diplomatic headache wrapped in soft skin and baffling optimism. The species had been granted associate membership 6 months ago, after their planet was discovered sitting smack in the middle of a contested trade route. The diplomatic solution was simple: absorb them before someone else did. Standard procedure dictated treating them like all new members, which meant polite condescension and carefully monitored activities. After all, they were clearly a juvenile species who had barely figured out faster-than-light travel and still ate by shoving organic matter into face holes like barbarians. The human in question had immediately requested assignment to Draven 7th, a backwater research world at the Empire's frontier. This should have been fine. This should have been a lovely quiet posting where she could catalog moss or whatever primitive hobby her people considered science. Instead, she had submitted 73 resource requests in 2 months, caused 4 diplomatic incidents with mining operations, and somehow attracted the attention of the Obsidian Claw Syndicate, a criminal organization that usually ignored anything without immediate profit potential. "We need to assign her a royal guard," Feng announced to his deputy, a feathered avix who looked like someone had given a bird opposable thumbs and delusions of grandeur. The human, Deputy Administrator Yellen's crest feathers, flattened in what his species considered an expression of deep concern. "Sir, with respect, is that not excessive? Humans are Category 4 sentience. They require protection from stares and mild weather." Feng pulled up the incident reports with a gesture that made his holographic interface bloom like a flower of bureaucratic misery. She wandered into an active plasma mining site because she detected interesting geological formation. She tried to negotiate with Obsidian Claw enforcers using what she called reasonable discourse. She filed a complaint that our warning signs were not in Earth Standard English, a language spoken by 0.003% of the Imperial population. Yellen's feathers indicated understanding mixed with sympathy. "She is an idiot. She has 3 doctoral degrees in xenobiology. An educated idiot. The worst kind." Feng pulled up personnel files, scrolling through available guards with the enthusiasm of someone selecting their own executioner. The Royal Guard were the Empire's finest warriors, drawn from species with proud martial traditions, and the good sense to respect danger when they saw it. Assigning one to babysit a human was essentially career suicide, which meant he needed someone who had recently angered the wrong people. Perfect. His search found exactly 1 candidate currently between assignments and available for immediate deployment. Guard Captain Henthier of House Bronze Claw, a Drevex warrior with 2 decades of distinguished service and 1 recent incident involving the Emperor's nephew, a formal dinner, and what the report diplomatically termed justified but politically inconvenient violence. The Drevex were apex predators from a high-gravity world, standing 8 feet tall with armored scales and enough natural weapons to classify as a mobile armory. They considered themselves the pinnacle of martial excellence and had the trophy collection to prove. They also, unfortunately, found humans unbearably cute, like watching a particularly stupid puppy attempt to understand quantum mechanics. Feng sent the assignment notification and leaned back, imagining Henthier's reaction. The message would arrive during what the Drevex called contemplation hour, which actually meant showing off at the training grounds while junior guards pretended to be impressed. Across the station in the Royal Guard barracks, Henthier was indeed training, demonstrating proper disemboweling technique on a practice dummy, when his communicator chimed with the distinctive tone that meant his day was about to get significantly worse. He read the assignment twice, certain he had misunderstood. Protect a human xenobiologist on a frontier research world. Duration indefinite. Priority level embarrassingly high for such a ridiculous task. His secondary eyelids closed in what humans might interpret as a long, pained blink, but what Drevex understood as the physical manifestation of professional despair. Around him, other guards suddenly found their own training extremely interesting, which meant they had already received the news through the rumor network that moved faster than Imperial communications. He could feel their amusement like humidity in the air. "Something funny, Guard Lieutenant." Henthir directed his question at a younger Dravex who had failed to suppress an amused hiss. "No, Captain. Though I hear human research stations have excellent climate control. Very safe. No sharp corner." The other guards made sounds that in a less disciplined species might have been laughter. Henthir accessed the human's file, hoping for something that might explain why she warranted a royal guard. Her name was listed with the peculiar human naming convention that put family designation last, as if ancestry was an afterthought. Her academic credentials were impressive by human standards, which meant approximately adequate by galactic ones. Her photograph showed the standard human features: bilateral symmetry, forward-facing eyes suggesting an evolutionary predator heritage that her species had clearly forgotten, and that bizarre facial arrangement that made Dravex instinctively want to feed and protect her. Her assignment record showed the incidents Feng had mentioned, plus several more that had apparently been classified under minor misunderstandings not worth reporting. These included accidentally discovering an illegal smuggling operation while rock climbing, getting trapped in a cave system for 3 days and emerging with detailed notes on crystalline formations, and somehow befriending a pack of 6-legged predators that usually ate anything that moved. The file was labeled, "well-meaning but requires constant supervision." Wonderful. Henthir began the process of packing for frontier deployment, which for a Dravex warrior meant weapons, armor, more weapons, emergency weapons and a small bag of personal items. His quartermaster, an efficient Avex named Holm, provided supplies with the sympathy of someone watching a comrade march toward social execution. "I have included human-safe rations," Holmes said, loading containers onto a transport cart. "Also a comprehensive guide to human fragility. Did you know they can be injured by their own planet's sun? I am aware humans are essentially made of tissue paper and false confidence. There is a section on emotional fragility as well. Apparently they require regular affirmation and have something called feelings that must be considered." Henthir's tail lashed once, the Dravex equivalent of a heavy sigh. "Anything else?" "Yes." Holmes' crest feathers indicated genuine concern. "Try not to accidentally break her. The paperwork would be tremendous." 3 days later, Henthir's transport descended toward Draven the Seventh, a planet whose main features were remote and boring. The research station appeared on sensors. A standard prefabricated imperial facility dropped onto a plateau surrounded by scrubland and rocky formation. Scans showed no immediate threats, no dangerous wildlife above Class 2, and weather patterns that barely qualified as interesting. This would be the most tedious assignment of his career. His ship landed on the designated pad, and he emerged into thin air that smelled of dust and vegetation. The station itself looked standard. Modular construction, basic defensive shields, enough supplies to last 6 months between shipments. A place where someone could conduct research in complete safety and absolute boredom. The human emerged from the main building, and Henthir's threat assessment protocols engaged automatically before his brain reminded them this was ridiculous. She stood perhaps 5.5 feet tall, built with the sturdy frame of someone who did field work but still looked like a strong breeze might require medical intervention. Her hair was pulled back in a practical configuration, and she wore research gear that had clearly seen significant use. She waved at him. Actual manual greeting gesture, as if they were meeting at a social gathering instead of a professional protection detail. "You must be the guard they assigned," she called out, walking toward him with the casual confidence of someone who had never met anything that wanted to kill her. "I told them this was unnecessary, but apparently my incident reports were concerning." Her incident reports were, by Henthir's professional assessment, absolutely terrifying. This human had survived situations that should have killed her through what appeared to be sheer obliviousness to danger. "Guard Captain Henthir, House Bronze Claw." He kept his voice formal, professional. "I am here to ensure your continued survival." "Right. Well, I am mostly harmless and generally careful." She smiled, which humans apparently did to indicate friendliness but which showed teeth in a way that should be threatening. Except it absolutely was not. "I have been working on something really exciting. Do you want to see?" Every instinct told Henthir that whatever excited a human who had accidentally discovered criminal operations and befriended predators was something he should approach with extreme caution. "That would be acceptable," he said, "because refusing would be unprofessional, and his career was already damaged enough." She led him toward the far side of the facility, chatting about geological formations and atmospheric composition with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a pleasant hobby instead of rocks and air. Henthir followed his sensor suite, scanning continuously for threats and finding nothing but standard frontier planet readings. They rounded the station's main building, heading toward what his scans identified as reinforced enclosures typically used for specimen containment. "So I know this was not exactly approved through proper channels," the human said, and every combat protocol in Henthir's body suddenly activated. "But I found something incredible, and I could not just leave it there, you know." No, he did not know. He suspected he was about to find out. She palmed open a security gate that led to a large enclosure, easily 200 meters across, surrounded by force fields that registered military-grade strength. Why did a xenobiologist need military-grade containment? The human stepped through, gesturing for him to follow, and Henthir's world inverted when he saw what was inside. A void worm. An actual, living, full-grown void worm. His weapons were in his hands before conscious thought engaged, and his emergency beacon activated automatically, screaming distress across imperial frequencies. Because void worms were they had been hunted to extinction 5 centuries ago, after they had sterilized 14 colony worlds, and killed approximately 4 billion sentients across 6 species. They were apex mega-predators that had evolved in the dead spaces between stars and considered all other life forms as either food or entertainment before becoming food. And this human had one as a pet. The creature was magnificent in the way that hurricanes and supernovas were magnificent, which was to say objectively beautiful and absolutely capable of ending civilization. 30 feet of obsidian scales that absorbed light like a black hole's event horizon, wings that folded against its body in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, and a head shaped like every nightmare evolution had ever produced. Its eyes glowed with bioluminescence that shifted through colors no natural atmosphere should contain. Those eyes were currently focused on a small rubber ball the human held. "Sit," the human said, and the apex predator that had once depopulated star systems sat on its haunches like an oversized dog. Henthir's brain attempted to process this information and failed spectacularly. His combat computer, designed by the finest military engineers in the Empire, simply displayed an error message and requested a restart. His emergency beacon continued screaming into the void, which seemed appropriate because that was approximately what his sanity was doing. The human threw the ball. The void worm, creature of extinction and terror, bounded after it with enthusiasm that would have been adorable if the ground had not cracked under its weight. It returned, dropped the ball at her feet and made a sound that Henthir's translator interpreted as pleased rumbling, but which his instincts recognized as the noise planets made before dying. "Good boy," she said, scratching behind the creature's jaw ridge, where armor plating met in seams that could theoretically be exploited by weapons that did not exist yet. The worm leaned into the contact, its massive head tilting in a way that resembled content. Henthir's communicator exploded with incoming transmissions. Command wanted status updates. His house wanted confirmation he still lived. 3 different military divisions wanted coordinates. Someone from Imperial Archives was demanding he verify the species classification. He ignored all of them because his eyes could not leave the scene before him. A human, the galaxy's newest and most bafflingly fragile species, casually training a creature that military doctrine said required orbital bombardment at minimum safe distance. How? He managed, and his translator gave up trying to convey the full spectrum of his horror, confusion, and professional crisis, settling on just that single word. The human looked over, apparently remembering he existed. "Oh, you look concerned. Is this about perm? Because I filed the xenobiological specimen paperwork, and technically nobody said I could not have one. That is a void worm." His voice came out flat, which was impressive because internally he was experiencing what the Draveks called soul fracture, the sensation of reality breaking into pieces that no longer fit together properly. Well, yeah. Specifically, he is approximately 4 years old, which makes him juvenile by their life cycle standards. I found his egg in a dead ship drifting near the Abyss Nebula. Someone had put it in stasis, probably collectors or researchers who died before extraction. The stasis field was failing, and I could not just leave him to die. Of course she could not. Humans had this bizarre compulsion toward anything they perceived as helpless, which apparently included infant extinction machine. So I brought him here, hatched him in a controlled environment, and have been raising him using comparative behavioral techniques drawn from Earth predator species. Turns out they share surprising similarities with certain Terran reptiles in terms of social bonding and reward-based learning. The worm, apparently bored with the ball,
wandered over to a feeding station and began eating what Henthir's scanner identified as approximately 300 pounds of synthesized protein. It ate neatly, almost delicately, which was somehow more disturbing than if it had simply devoured everything in sight. You trained it, not a question, because he was watching it happen, but his brain needed confirmation from his mouth that this was real. Him. And basic commands, territory boundaries, appropriate feeding behavior. He is actually very intelligent, possibly sapient adjacent based on my testing. Watch this. She walked to a control panel and activated a holographic display showing three-dimensional geometric pattern. The worm's head swiveled, eyes tracking the shapes with evident interest. The human manipulated the display, creating increasingly complex patterns, and the creature followed along, occasionally making sounds that might have been communication or might have been deciding which part of the galaxy to sterilize first. He can solve spatial puzzles at levels comparable to Category 3 sentience, she explained with the pride of a researcher presenting groundbreaking data, and the obliviousness of someone who did not realize she was describing an apocalypse with hobbies. I think the species was classified as mindless predators, because nobody ever tried actually communicating with them. They were too busy running away or trying to kill them. Henthir's communicator indicated 17 new priority messages. His beacon had apparently reached the nearest military outpost, because his scanner showed 3 fast attack cruisers, changing course toward Draven 7. You need to stop, he said, finding his voice somewhere between professional duty and existential collapse. That creature is classified as Galaxy-class threat. Military doctrine requires immediate termination of any confirmed Void Wyrm sighting. Ships are coming. They will sterilize this entire continent from orbit. The human's expression shifted through confusion to concern to something that looked uncomfortably like determination. He has not hurt anyone. He is not dangerous, if properly managed. You cannot just kill something because it could be threatening. It ate 14 colony worlds. His species did that. He has never even seen another living Void Wyrm. Punishing him for what others did centuries ago is just genocide with extra steps. The worm chose that moment to notice Henthir properly, its attention focusing with the intensity of a targeting laser. It approached with movements that seemed almost curious, head tilting as it examined him. This close, Henthir could see the individual scales, each one etched with patterns that suggested either evolutionary perfection or deliberately malicious design. The creature's breath washed over him, hot enough to register on his thermal sensors, smelling of ozone and something his brain insisted was the scent of deep space itself. It sniffed him, a sound like atmospheric processors straining, and then did something that made Henthir question his entire understanding of reality. It chirped, a small, almost questioning sound, and looked back at the human as if asking permission or perhaps requesting introduction protocol. This is Henthir, she told the creature, actually told it like it could understand complex language structures. He is going to be staying here for a while. The worm extended its head toward Henthir in what behavioral analysis subroutines suggested might be a greeting gesture among pack predators. His hand moved automatically, decades of training overriding the part of his brain that was screaming, and he touched the creature's snout. Warm, solid, real. The worm made another pleased rumbling sound and returned to its protein station, apparently satisfied with the social interaction. 3 fast attack cruisers entered high orbit, and Henthir's communicator exploded with demands for status confirmation and target designation. His commanding officer's voice cut through the chatter with authority born from 40 years of military service. Guard Captain, confirm Void Wyrm sighting. Prepare for immediate evacuation. We have authorization for surface bombardment. Henthir looked at the human, who had moved to stand between him and the worm with body language that suggested she would physically fight 3 military cruisers, if necessary. He looked at the creature, currently eating its afternoon meal with better table manners than most sentients manage. His entire career, his honor, his house reputation, everything balanced against one simple question. Was he watching a doomsday weapon, or was he watching a xenobiologist, successfully doing something the Empire had never considered possible? Guard Captain, respond. He made a decision that would either revolutionize imperial xenobiology, or end his bloodline in disgrace. False alarm, he said into the communicator. Sensor ghost. No Void Wyrm present. The human's expression shifted to surprise and something that might have been gratitude. The worm continued eating, oblivious to how close it had come to orbital bombardment. Confirmed false alarm? His commander asked, Suspicion clear even through subspace transmission. Confirmed. Will file incident report. He closed the channel before more questions could arise. The human was staring at him now, and Henthir felt the weight of what he had just done settle onto his shoulders, like parade armor. He had lied to Imperial Command, he had falsified a threat report, he had potentially endangered the entire sector, if her assessment was wrong. Why? She asked simply. Henthir watched the worm finish its meal and return to the ball, nudging it hopefully toward the human. Because I am supposed to protect you, and if they destroy your research, they would have to destroy you as well. Contamination protocol. Also because somewhere in the last 5 minutes, his threat assessment had been completely dismantled and rebuilt around a terrifying new possibility. Maybe humans were not the harmless curiosity everyone assumed. Maybe a species that could look at the galaxy's most feared predator and think needs proper socialization was actually the most dangerous thing in the Empire. I need to understand how this is possible, he said, his voice carrying the weight of professional necessity and personal crisis. Teach me.
The human led him to her research station's command center, a cluttered space that combined cutting-edge Imperial technology with what Henthir could only describe as aggressively organized chaos. Datapads covered every surface, holographic displays showed biological readouts that made his head hurt, and somewhere a beverage sat cold and forgotten next to equipment worth more than a small warship. So the basic principle, she began, pulling up video logs that showed the worm at various stages of development, is that most apex predators are not mindless killing machines. They are survival-optimized organisms responding to environmental pressures and biological imperatives. The earliest footage showed an egg the size of a cargo container, its surface writhing with patterns that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. Then hatching, the infant worm emerging in a cascade of what looked like concentrated darkness. It had been small then, merely the size of a ground transport, eyes unfocused, and movements uncoordinated. When he hatched, he imprinted on me as the primary caregiver. This established baseline social hierarchy and trust framework. She advanced through footage showing her feeding the infant worm, the creature following her around the enclosure with movements that genuinely resembled a lost child seeking parental guidance. Henthir's military training identified dozens of moments where the creature could have killed her. His behavioral analysis systems noted that it never even came close. Void worms are pack hunters in their natural life cycle, she continued, displaying biological data that should not exist because the species had been extinct before proper studies could be conducted. The Empire exterminated them as juveniles and adults but never observed their social development phases. They assumed mindless aggression because they only encountered specimens that had lost their pack structure or were defending territory. The footage showed training sessions, the human using positive reinforcement techniques that any competent animal handler would recognize, reward-based learning, consistent boundary establishment, social bonding through play and feeding ritual. Except the subject was a creature that could theoretically crack a planet's crust if sufficiently motivated. You are saying the Empire killed them before understanding them, Henthir said slowly, watching a video of the worm learning to control its breath weapon by practicing on designated targets, the human praising each successful demonstration of restraint. Essential, which is understandable given they were actively eating colonists. But yes, nobody tried communication or behavioral modification because the immediate threat superseded long-term study. His communicator chimed again. Not command this time, but his house's military coordinator, a grizzled veteran named Orthax, who had survived 3 wars and possessed the temperament of someone who had seen too much to be impressed by anything. Henthir, your emergency beacon activated and then you reported false alarm. Explain. There was no lying to Orthax. The veteran could smell deception through subspace channels. I need you to authorize secure channel. What I am about to tell you violates approximately 47 military protocol. A pause that stretched long enough for Henthir to imagine Orthax's scales shifting through colors that indicated either curiosity or preparation for disappointment. Authorized. Speak, Henthir explained. Everything. The worm, the training, the human's complete dismissal of proper threat classification. He expected outrage, immediate orders for termination, possibly charges of treason. Instead he got silence. Then the human trained a void worm to play fetch. Affirmative. More silent. Henthir could hear Orthax breathing, which meant the veteran was thinking hard enough that autonomic functions required conscious attention. Do you understand what this means for our war beast programs? Henthia had not actually. His brain had been too busy processing personal crisis to consider wider implications, but now, hearing Orthac say it aloud, the pieces assembled with horrifying clarity. The Drevex military, like most imperial forces, used trained creatures for various combat roles: shock troops, reconnaissance, siege breaking. They were effective but limited by the creature's intelligence and trainability. Void Wyrms were exponentially more powerful than any war beast currently in service. She made the impossible routine, Orthax continued, and his voice carried something that might have been respect or might have been fear. I am bringing specialists. Do not let anything happen to that human or her research. That is a direct order from House Command. The channel closed, and Henthia stood in the cluttered research station, contemplating how his career had transformed from disgrace to accidentally critical in approximately 30 minutes. The human was watching him with an expression that suggested she understood none of the political earthquake she had just triggered. So, she said carefully, are you going to try to kill him? No. Apparently I am going to ask you how to train war beasts, because my house just realized you have made 7 centuries of military doctrine obsolete. Her face did something complicated that might have been pride mixed with concern. I just wanted to save an endangered species. You saved something that should have stayed extinct and turned it into evidence that humans are either brilliant or insane, and I have not determined which. The worm chose that moment to scratch at the enclosure entrance, making sounds that the translator interpreted as bored, want attention, possibly food. The human moved to the entrance controls. He needs his afternoon enrichment session. Do you want to help? Every survival instinct said no. His career prospect said yes. His house's direct order said absolutely yes. Define enrichment session, Henthia said, following her back outside where the worm waited with enthusiasm that would be heartwarming if it came from literally any other creature in existence. Advanced spatial puzzles, coordination exercises, and social bonding activities. She produced what looked like a complex 3-dimensional structure from a storage unit. He is developing abstract reasoning capabilities that suggest genuine sapience. I think with proper education he could potentially learn actual language. The worm made excited sounds and approached the puzzle structure, examining it with clear intent. The human activated it, and sections began moving in patterns that Henthia's own spatial reasoning found challenging. The creature studied the mechanism, head tilting as it processed the problem, and then carefully manipulated specific sections with a precision that seemed impossible for something with claws designed for planetary excavation. The puzzle solved, rewarding mechanisms dispensed treats, and the worm consumed them while making sounds that definitely indicated pleasure and possibly pride. Now you try, the human said to Henthia. Give him a command, be confident and clear. He responds to authority but also to respect. Henthia approached the creature that could kill him in approximately 300 different ways. The worm watched him with intelligence that was no longer even slightly debatable. Sit, he commanded, using his command voice that had ordered soldiers through combat zones and political nightmares. The Void Wyrm, extinct terror of the galaxy, creature of nightmares and military extinction protocols, sat politely and looked at him expectant. Henthia's worldview completed its transformation from rational understanding to whatever this new reality was. Good, he said, because apparently this was his life now. The worm's pleased rumbling shook the ground, and somewhere in orbit, 3 military cruisers maintained position, unaware that the greatest shift in imperial military capability in centuries was happening because one human had decided a baby planet killer deserved a chance. Within 2 weeks, Dreven to Sephant transformed from forgettable research outpost to the worst-kept secret in imperial military circles. Guard Captain Henthia's quiet station assignment had become a parade ground for specialists, who arrived with official clearances and unofficial disbelief. The first wave brought House Bronze Claw's senior beastmasters, veterans who had trained war creatures for decades and arrived with the confidence of experts entering familiar territory. They departed 3 days later with shattered assumptions and requisition forms for equipment they had never imagined needing. The humans' training methodology documentation filled data cores that got classified above Henthia's clearance level, which was impressive since he was physically present for most of it. The second wave brought representatives from 4 other military houses, each convinced their own war beast programs were somehow different enough that human techniques would not apply.
They were wrong. The human demonstrated positive reinforcement protocols on a Krell siege beast that had been considered untrainable after it ate 2 handlers. Within 6 hours it was responding to basic commands. Within 3 days it was solving puzzles designed for Category 4 sentience. The beast's original handler, a scarred Dravex named Wolf, who had lost his left arm to the creature, watched the human scratch behind its sensory ridges while it practically purred. "This is unnatural," Wolf declared, his remaining hand twitching toward weapons he no longer carried. "This is behavioral science," the human corrected, offering him documentation that explained conditioning theory using small words and helpful diagrams. "Your species has been using dominance-based training for war beasts, which works but creates unstable aggression patterns. Cooperative partnership models produce better results with lower handler mortality." Lower handler mortality was apparently a compelling argument, because Wolf spent the next 4 days following the human around taking notes with the intensity of a religious convert. The third wave was Imperial military command sent observers, then analysts, then someone with enough rank that even Henthier had to stand at attention. They watched training sessions through remote feeds, asked pointed questions about scalability and implementation timelines, and departed with the satisfied expressions of people who had just discovered their competitors were doing everything wrong. Henthier's role evolved from protective detail to something resembling administrative coordinator, except his job was managing an endless stream of military personnel who wanted access to either the human or her research, or increasingly both. His days consisted of scheduling conflicts, clearance verification, and explaining repeatedly that no, visitors could not just approach the Void Wyrm without proper introduction protocols, because it still possessed all its extinction event capabilities regardless of current behavioral condition. The human, for her part, seemed genuinely baffled by the attention. She continued her research with the focused determination of someone who did not realize she had accidentally revolutionized military doctrine across multiple species. Her daily routine remained unchanged: morning enrichment sessions with the worm, afternoon behavioral documentation, evening feeding and socialization activities. The fact that each session now had 40 observers watching through secured feeds apparently did not register as unusual. "I really just wanted to study xenobiology," she mentioned one evening while reviewing data on the worm's developing communication capabilities. "This has gotten extremely complicated." Henthier, who was currently processing 17 separate requests for training consultation from different Imperial military divisions, made a sound that his translator rendered as bitter laughter. "You trained a Void Wyrm using techniques from your homeworld. You made the galaxy's most feared predator into evidence that humanity understands behavioral science better than species who have been doing this for millennia. Complicated is insufficient description." She looked genuinely surprised, but the principles are basic. Positive reinforcement, consistent boundaries, social bonding through trust-building activities. This is elementary animal psychology. Elementary to humans perhaps. Revolutionary to everyone else. The ultimate absurdity arrived 4 weeks into what Henthier had started calling the occupation period. A formal Imperial delegation appeared, announced through proper channels this time, requesting a meeting with the human regarding potential policy changes. The meeting occurred in her research station, because moving the human to proper Imperial facilities was deemed too disruptive to her work, which itself indicated how thoroughly priorities had shifted. The delegation included an actual Imperial policy coordinator, someone whose job was advising the Emperor on matters that affected multiple species and systems. The coordinator, a Vethian whose crystalline thought processes made them notoriously difficult to surprise, sat in the cluttered research station and reviewed training documentation with the focused intensity of someone reading divine scripture. "We are revising human species classification," the coordinator announced without preamble, because Vethians considered small talk a waste of neural cycles. "Current designation as Category 4 sentient with limited capabilities and required protection protocols is clearly inaccurate." The human blinked. "I mean, we are pretty fragile compared to most species. Physical durability is insufficient metric. Your species demonstrates advanced behavioral comprehension, innovative problem-solving approaches, and apparent disregard for established threat classification. These traits indicate significantly higher capability assessment." Henthier watched the human process this information, with the same expression she used when the worm did something unexpected, a mixture of curiosity and vague concern about implications she had not fully considered. "So what does that mean practically?" she asked. "It means humanity will receive expanded privileges within Imperial structure. research access, military consultation opportunities, diplomatic considerations previously unavailable. It also means humans will no longer be classified as requiring protective oversight for routine activities. The coordinator turned attention to Henthier with the directness of someone about to deliver either promotion or execution. "God, Captain, your assignment is hereby modified. You will remain with this human as permanent liaison and protection detail, but designation changes from protective custody to diplomatic security. Your house has requested this arrangement specifically." Of course Henthier had filed enough reports detailing the human's methodologies that House Bronzeclaw now considered her a strategic asset worth an entire military division. His career had transformed from disgrace to essential faster than he could process the transition. "There is one more thing," the coordinator continued. "The Emperor wishes to know if your training techniques could be applied to the Imperial wardrakes. They have been unstable for generations, and conventional approaches have failed to resolve aggression issue." The human's expression shifted to the focused interest she showed when presented with a challenging behavioral problem. "I would need to review their current training protocols and behavioral history, also environmental enrichment data and social structure information. All documentation will be provided. The Emperor is very interested in your assessment." After the delegation departed, Henthier found the human sitting outside the worm's enclosure, watching the creature practice flight maneuvers in the evening light. It moved with grace that seemed impossible for something that size, wings cutting through air with precision that suggested either natural genius or learned skill. Probably both. "This was supposed to be a quiet research posting," she said without looking at him. "Most people do not adopt extinct apocalypse beasts," Henthier replied, settling beside her with the comfortable familiarity that had developed over weeks of shared crisis management. "He was just an egg. He did not ask to be born into a species everyone feared." The worm completed its flight pattern and landed with ground-shaking impact that would have sent most species running. It approached the enclosure barrier, making the questioning chirp that meant it wanted attention or food or possibly philosophical discussion about the nature of existence. With the worm, all three were equally possible. The human stood, moving to the enclosure entrance. "Want to help with evening feeding?" Henthier, who had begun this assignment, expecting tedious babysitting duty and instead discovered that humans were dangerously competent in ways nobody had predicted, followed her inside. Across the Empire, military training protocols were being rewritten. Imperial policy regarding humanity was undergoing revision. God Captain Henthier's personnel file had been updated from punishment assignment to critical diplomatic posting, and the Emperor himself was apparently interested in human behavioral expertise. All because one human had looked at something that should have stayed extinct and decided it deserved kindness instead of fear. The worm ate its evening meal with perfect manners while Henthier contemplated the bizarre trajectory his life had taken. Somewhere in Imperial High Command, someone was probably having the same realization he had experienced weeks ago. Humanity was not harmless. They were just dangerous in ways nobody had thought to measure. The human scratched behind the worm's jaw ridge, and the creature made pleased sounds that registered on seismic monitors. She remained completely oblivious to the fact that she had accidentally proven humans were potentially the most disruptive force the Empire had encountered in centuries, which was, Henthier reflected, probably the most human thing about her.